My guest today is Mads Torgersen. Mads, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to be here today.
Oh, thank you. I'm equally excited, maybe even more so. Tell us, what do you do for a living?
I am the lead designer of the C# programming language. I work for Microsoft and I take care of the evolution of the programming language called C#.
Awesome. I'm a longtime user of C Sharp, but I know very little about how it's designed. And let me ask you start by asking this question. Let me start by asking this question. Uh, as someone who is probably never going to develop a programming language, is there any value in me understanding how that language is developed?
I think I think yes. I think certainly as a user of a programming language or as someone trying to choose a programming language, I think it's good to have some sense of what's the philosophy being applied. What is the culture around this language? Does it evolve a lot, a little? Does it have a lot of community participation? Does it have a good track record of meeting the challenges that developers face? That kind of thing. So having some of that insight, it's kind of like in many other aspects of life, you kind of want to look into people you are buying from to see if if they can be trusted to give you um, you know a good product.
Yeah, and C Sharp, I started using it, gosh, 25 years ago. I think that's about, I started using it early in its time. When did you join the team? When did you start? Were you there at the very beginning?
I wasn't there in the very beginning. I kind of was, but wasn't. I visited Microsoft for 6 months in '99, so I knew some things.
That's
But
about the time that it started, I think.
yeah, but I only joined Microsoft in earnest in 2005.
Okay.
So it had been out for a few years by then.
Okay. Well, tell me some of the things that go into when you're maintaining a language, especially one as mature as C Sharp. What kind of steps go into adding new features, making it better, etc.?
Yeah, we first of all, you're speaking to the philosophy part. We definitely for C# we have a strong eagerness to evolve the language.
Hmm.
The programming landscape and the programming language landscape evolves all the time. The kinds of things that people build with their programming languages changes and so on. So um, our philosophy is you either you follow along and you do what it takes to stay relevant, to stay like a good choice for those new things as well, or you become legacy and you will gradually fade into the past. So we want to still be a good choice
Hmm.
for all new uh, kinds of workloads as well as old ones, and we want to compare favorably to other programming languages out there. And so we lean into evolving C# quite a bit to removing nuisances and obstacles that people report a lot, and to add big, if necessary, innovative features to the language, even knowing that we can never take anything away. We're still kind of leaning into that, which of course we try to be judicious and we try not to follow fads. We want to feel like anything we add can stand the test of time to our best, estimation. Future is so hard to predict, right? But but that said, we're kind of on the aggressive side on language evolution.
Yeah, you bring up a good point that you don't want to break anything that exists, which is hard because you've got 25 years of users out there that are depending upon the way things work now in C Sharp. Is
Oh,
that a big challenge?
it is a big challenge. Like any new feature has to coexist peacefully with everything that's already there, essentially without breaking any existing code. There are billions and billions of lines of C# code out there, and if we start breaking a lot of those, then we're in trouble, right? So we do our best um, to kind of fit in new ideas in such a way that they're still natural and they still feel like the best way of doing that feature while not upsetting what's already there. And that is often a large chunk of the work on a given feature is making sure that it fits in, doesn't break customers and doesn't, you know, grate against the other features that are already there.
Yeah. Where do these ideas come from?
Everywhere. C Sharp is developed in the open. There's an open source, there's a GitHub repo for the C Sharp evolution,
Mhm.
as well as, so for language design, as well as one for the implementation. And and that's where we do all our work. And a lot of the insights that become language features come through that interaction, as well as many, many other user interactions that we have. So sometimes that is, ready to roll feature ideas, but just as often, or maybe more often, it's problems that people have, challenges, things that aren't easy enough, or have too many steps, or too clunky a syntax, or something like that. And then when that builds to a certain amount of signal, then we will invest in creating good general appealing solutions to that as much as we can.
So this idea that a lot of these things are more evolutionary rather than revolutionary. You just want to make things easier as opposed to adding a radical new feature to the language. Is that
Oh, we do some of
generally
both, but
some of it?
I mean, we can't revolutionize all the time, right?
Okay.
People need a breather, and we can't like add massive new stuff all the time. But we don't, when we feel like a massive new feature is warranted, we don't
Mhm.
shy away from doing it. It'll often take us several years, but we will pursue it. But just in terms of number of features, many more are smaller, and many address a more evolutionary thing, like they're like shorthand syntax, or
Mhm.
they allow more efficient code, like from um, an execution efficiency standpoint, or stuff like that.
I see.
So we'll try to do some of both.
Yeah, and I like this trend over the last, oh gosh, 10 years, I think, of developing things in the open. Uh, and I remember the days when every 3.5 years, a new version would come out, and I had to race. It would be announced, and I had to race to learn everything. And now I've got
Yeah.
some time to warm up to it. I can see it in preview. I can see it as it's being developed.
Yeah, I think that is, for us, that change has been, I will say, 98% positive.
Mm,
Um, the being able to have those discussions in real time, and not, try to figure out the right thing in isolation from our users, really is, is just hugely beneficial to us and the language and the users themselves. It does mean that you sort of get to watch the sausage getting made, right?
right.
There are decisions that we make that are heartbreaking, or things that we think we will do and then we don't. And people get to see all of that, and they get to have the heartbreak over, oh, I wanted that so much. Or you should have gone that other way. I don't agree. So um, there is more sort of, there's more opportunity for disappointment here and there. We do see that sometimes, but we uh, I think we get a much better deal still by, and everyone does, by kind of being able to go through the motions in real time as much as people want, and as their sort of level of engagement allows for.
Okay, so there are things that people want to see that you either don't have time to do, or you start going down a path and kind of dial it back and decide against it. Who how are those decisions made? How do you decide which features are going to be prioritized in the next version?
Um, well, they sort of happen on the fly a little bit. We triage a lot of features, that we just say, hey, we feel like this one could take priority right now, given finite resources, and only so much should go into a language in a given time frame. But also, many times we're like, yeah, this feels like a really great idea, and we invest a lot of time exploring it, maybe even prototyping it, and then we find, well, actually, this is not going to work out. So that's sort of like where the heartbreak is in it for us. We invest a lot and we have to be ready. And this happens over and over. And it's just like part of any creative process where you take some risks is fairly often you get to a point where like, yeah, this isn't really going to work out, is it? Let's put it back on the shelf. Say sorry to everyone. Yeah. And if you couldn't do it, this is why. And come back some other time.
I think people appreciate that transparency.
Yeah, by and
It,
large, I think that is, yeah,
yeah.
everybody gets it. And actually, yeah, I mean, it also just from that standpoint, people can see that we're also just humans. We're also just doing our job and trying our best. And so the tenor of the conversation becomes much more personal in a good way, much more human to human rather than, oh, this big corporation, this big faceless corporation did a stupid thing again that I totally don't agree with. Like, very few people feel like they have to trash talk us or something like that because we're trying our best to be open and to really do our best on everyone's behalf. Right?
Yeah, I think somebody described that to me as I'm paraphrasing here, but people, it's easy for people to hate Microsoft, but it's hard for them to hate Mads. If you're an actual human being, I'm substituting your name in what I was
Okay.
told,
Oh,
right?
you didn't hear it with my name. That's something at least.
But I still stand by that. It's still a true statement. But
Yeah.
you're humanizing. There's a faceless corporation. Of course, people are gonna be unfiltered about that and toxic about it sometimes because you know corporations aren't people. They don't have feelings, right? But the
Hmm.
fact is that they're made up of people.
Yeah,
And when you put
that's
when you
true.
put a face to that, it makes it a lot harder for people to do personal attacks.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really true.
Yeah, you did mention that you have a desire to continually evolve the language, but now the language is very mature. It's 25 years old, approximately. Next year's 25. I'm not sure, but it's really close
I
to that.
think, yeah, I think it is this year probably. Yeah, depending on how you
And
count.
is there any point at which you're done? The language is baked and you've implemented everything you want to? Is that ever going to happen?
Um, there might be a point where we decide to leave it be. But uh, like essentially, as long as the world keeps evolving, as long as the state of the art keeps evolving, then, uh, as I said, we either follow along or we say we can't turn this next corner. Like C sharp, it doesn't make sense for C sharp to turn this new corner in how the world does programming. Here's the thing that we just can't follow along anymore, and then we could make then I could see us making a decision to say, well, this was nice. We had a good run, a good 50-year run, or something like that.
There you go.
Um, but so far that hasn't happened, right? So
Okay.
far, everything that comes up, that we seem to be able to find our way to still be relevant. That goes for both like, yeah, new things in the domain, also like just changes in what people expect of a programming language. C sharp used to be a lot more verbose than it is today. Like we can still write the verbose code and it'll still work, but in so many ways, we've trimmed and slimmed it down in terms of the amount of syntax you need as a response to changes in the culture around newer programming languages that came out. And they're like, we really don't need all this ceremony. We're like, yeah, you're right. We don't actually need this ceremony. And we found ways to address that as well. So it's not always just about expressiveness. It's also about the feel of the language. And we tried our best. And I think we did a pretty good job of keeping sort of the core spirit of C sharp the same, even as we go through these evolutionary steps.
I remember a time that Microsoft was promoting C Sharp and Visual Basic as basically the only programming languages that you need. They wanted everyone to use those. And that's not true anymore. Now, I think the philosophy is we want you to build in our cloud, we want you to deploy things to Azure, but if you want to write them in Python or Java or Go, that's fine. And I wonder if that philosophy has changed the way your team works at all.
Um, Not as much as you'd think. it's kind of ironic because even as Microsoft as a company has, for good reason, embraced many more languages and developer stacks. C Sharp is also, C Sharp and .NET have also undergone sort of an evolution from being, closed source as we talked about, but also Windows specific to being open source, cross-platform, and, you know, becoming less Microsoft centric as well, if you will.
Sure.
Um, so I think we take I think we take all those other languages as healthy competition. We are all trying to do our best. We may find different like centers of gravity in terms of what we primarily offer to our users. JavaScript may be more front end oriented, still web oriented. Though we can do fine there. As C++ or Rust, they're more systems language oriented. They will require you to deal with more details in exchange for not having to use garbage collection and spend runtime cycles on that. But we can stretch towards that area too, and increasingly do. So I think these different programming languages have a lot of shared expressiveness, and many times it's, the choice of which to use isn't necessarily about which is objectively best for the task at hand, but like, what do my people already know, or
Sure.
some other factors like that. But we try to just take that competition and use it to always become better. Like people really enjoy how easy it is to index in Python, and let's go look at that some. What are the scenarios? Well, let's add index and range support to C Sharp, that kind of
Hmm.
thing. We
Yeah.
frankly sometimes it borders on stealing, but we all do it, so I don't, um, we've had our share of features stolen, and happily so. So that's kind of part of it as well.
Sure. It's the developers, people who use those tools that win from that kind of competition.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's been 20 years you've been on this team. You've been working on C Sharp. Do you have a favorite feature or something you're most proud of?
I'm most proud of async await,
Oh,
because that was something I drove that came into C Sharp, and not only like it was the intent of it was to make asynchronous programming finally not this huge error-prone mess, but the after effects were that many other programming languages picked up that same feature, and so having that kind of impact on the broader programming landscape is something I'm very proud of, and that's certainly gratifying. Having just one of those in a lifetime, it's like
that
okay,
is a very cool feature. That made the
yeah,
code a lot cleaner, easier to read. I remember trying to do asynchronous programming where you'd asynchronously call one method that would asynchronously call another method. Oh my goodness, my head would explode trying to write that code
yeah.
before async await came around.
And now try to do error handling in that model, right? And
Exactly.
everything falls down.
Is there anything we haven't covered that you think is really important to talk about?
Not off the top of my head. I mean, I can talk about programming languages forever, and it's all important to me. But I think this was pretty good uh, from the perspective that you bring of like how do you work with a programming language in the abstract.
Excellent. Well, this has been really educational for me, Mads. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you. It was great fun. Come for the technology, stay for the friends.